the literature passage. This passage is adapted from Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie, originally published in 1900. It was not often that she came to the play stirred to her heart's core by actualities. So it was not a common occurrence that she was stirred to her heart's core. She was moved by the play. Today, a low song of longing had been set singing in her heart by the finery, the merriment, the beauty she had seen. Oh, these women who had passed her by, hundreds and hundreds strong, who were they? Whence came the rich, elegant dresses, the astonishingly colored buttons, the knickknacks of silver and gold? Where were these lovely creatures housed? Amid what elegancies of carved furniture, decorated walls, elaborate tapestries did they move? Where were their rich apartments loaded with all that money could provide? In what stables champed these sleek, nervous horses and rested the gorgeous carriages? Where lounged the richly groomed footmen? Oh, the mansions, the lights, the perfume, the loaded boudoirs and tables. New York must be filled with such bowers, where the beautiful, insolent, supercilious creatures could not be. Some hothouses held them. It ached her to know that she was not one of them. That, alas, she had dreamed a dream, and it had not come true. She wondered at her own solitude these 2 years past, her indifference to the fact that she had never achieved what she had expected. So here in the first paragraph, we see that at the play, the sort of narrator is coming to terms with what she has done in her life. She admires these women in the play for their rich, elegant dresses, their astonishingly colored buttons, and she's kind of sad that, she's not one of these women that are rich, that have, these rich lives. The play was one of those drawing room concoctions in which charmingly overdressed ladies and gentlemen suffer the pangs of love and jealousy amid gilded surroundings. So even in their suffering, they're still surrounded by elegance, they're surrounded by riches. Such bon mots are never enticing to those who have all their days longed for such material surroundings and have never had them gratified. They have the charm of showing suffering under ideal conditions. Who would not grieve upon a gilded chair? Who would not suffer amid perfumed tapestries, cushioned furniture, and liveried servants? Grief under such circumstances becomes an enticing thing. Carrie longed to be of it. She wanted to take her sufferings, whatever they were in such a world, or failing that, at least to stimulate them under such charming conditions upon the stage. She affected her mind by what she had seen, that the play now seemed an extraordinarily beautiful thing. She was soon lost in the world it represented and wished that she might never return. So she sort of, immersed herself in this play. Between the acts, she studied the galaxy of the matinee attendants in front rows and boxes, and conceived a new idea of the possibilities of New York. So again, a reference to New York. So we can kind of see a dynamic in this passage. In the beginning, it talks about New York, it talks about the rich woman, and then it shifts back to the rich woman, and then now it shifts back to New York. Going out, the same Broadway taught her a sharper lesson. The scene she had witnessed coming down was now augmented and at its height. Such a crush of finery and folly she had never seen. It clinched her convictions concerning her state. She had not lived, could not lay claim to having lived, until something of this had come into her own life. Okay, so she says she thinks that her life is not fulfilled until she achieves this sort of life that the women in the play have. Women were spending money like water. She could see that in every elegant shop she passed. Flowers, candy, jewelry seemed the principal things in which the elegant dames were interested, and she had scarcely enough pin money to indulge in such outings as this a few times a month. That night, the pretty little flat seemed a commonplace thing. It was not what the rest of the world was enjoying. She saw the servant working at dinner with an indifferent eye. In her mind were running scenes of the play. Particularly, she remembered one beautiful actress, the sweetheart who had been wooed and won. The grace of this woman had won Carrie's heart. So she's sort of, emotionally connected to one of the characters that she remembers from the play. Her dresses had been all that art could suggest. Her sufferings had been so real. The anguish which she had portrayed, Carrie could feel. It was done as she was sure she could do it. There were places in which she could even do better. So she's saying, if the narrator had the chance, she could maybe, act out or portray the character better than the actor in the play had. Hence, she repeated the lines to herself. Oh, if she could only have such a part, how broad would be her life. She too could act appealingly. Okay, so now let's take a look at the questions. Number 1, throughout the passage, the narrator provides insight into Carrie's character mainly by explaining how Carrie is similar to a character she sees in a play. That's not really the main purpose. It's only really talked about at the end, so A is wrong. Developing a contrast between how Carrie perceives herself and how she is perceived by others. We don't see this contrast. We don't see a shift between how she looks at herself and how others look at her. It's more her own thoughts about her own life. So B is not a very good answer. Comparing Carrie's actual appearance to her perceptions of her appearance. Again, there's no contrast between sort of the actuality and her perceptions. So C is not a good answer. Juxtaposing Carrie's perceptions of the city, being New York, and her impressions at the theater. This is a very good answer because, again, at the beginning we can see the first half of the first paragraph talks about, the elegance, and then it shifts to New York. Then it shifts back to the elegance, and then during the break it shifts back to New York. So you really get a feel for who Carrie is as a person by her juxtaposition of the city and her thoughts about the play at the theater. So number 1 is D. Number 2, one important theme of the passage developed through the narrator's presentation of Carrie is that natural talent will languish if it remains unnourished. There's no talk about natural talent, so that's just wrong. Imagined pleasures have the power to make everyday life seem unacceptable. Imagined pleasures, again, we see this in the text because it's the imagined pleasures, the pleasures she imagines by looking at the women's lives in the play, have the power to make everyday life seem unacceptable. Do we see that in the passage? Yes, we do. Carrie realizes that she had never achieved what she had expected in life. Her everyday life seems very unacceptable when she compares it to these, pleasures that the women in the play have. So B seems like a very good answer. No goal is unfeasible so long as it's pursued with stubborn persistence. There is sort of a goal, but Carrie doesn't really show motivation to pursue this goal throughout. So C is wrong. Relationships are ultimately more important than money in determining an individual's happiness. We don't see a comparison between relationships and money. So D is wrong. Number 3, as used in line 2, stirred most nearly means. It was not often that she came to the play stirred to her heart's desires. Stirred most nearly means, I think, moved. She was very moved by the play. The play made her very emotional. The play really connected to her, something along the lines of that. And we see that choice A is moved, so that would be the correct answer for number 3. Number 4, what main effect did the words knickknacks, line 8, and concoctions, line 26, have on the passage? So let's take a look. In line 8, the knickknacks of silver and gold. The knickknacks, it seems like if I say I have a bunch of knickknacks on my desk, it might mean like a bunch of loosely related items, sort of kind of flashy items, but maybe some items that hold no real value. Items that aren't really that valuable. And then let's look at line 26 for concoctions. The play was one of those drawing room concoctions in which charmingly overdressed ladies. So in this case, concoctions is sort of like something that is made, something that's sort of like magical. It gives that magical sense. Maybe something that's magical on the surface, but under the surface, it's not really as it seems. So let's see. They underscore the widespread popularity of the things being described. Knickknacks and concoctions don't hold this context of widespread popularity, so I don't think we can choose A. They provide insight into the causes underlying Carrie's materialistic mindset. Do they really show why Carrie's materialistic? Do they show the causes? No, I don't think we can say that. They emphasize how little value Carrie actually attaches to the things she appears to covet. We can't really see Carrie's understanding of value. We don't know for a fact from just the use of these words, does Carrie really value these things or not? So C is wrong. D, they suggest that the things Carrie is observing ought to be regarded as trivial. This makes the most sense, I think, because once again, these knickknacks of silver and gold, they're sort of just, at the surface, they may seem very valuable, but they're really just knickknacks. They're just, these flashy little invaluable items. Again, the concoctions of the drawing room. These concoctions, these seemingly magical very grand events, but under the surface, they're not really all that. So D will be the correct answer. Number 5, the main purpose of the series of questions in the first paragraph is to. So the series of questions in the first paragraph. Today, a low song of longing had been set in her heart by the finery, the merriment, the beauty she had seen. Oh, these women who had passed her by, hundreds and hundreds strong, who were they? Whence came the rich, elegant dresses, the astonishingly colored buttons, the knickknacks of silver and gold? Where were these lovely creatures housed? Amid what elegancies of carved furniture, decorated walls, elaborate tapestries did they move? So here in the beginning, like with these questions, we can see, Carrie's envy, her sort of admiration for the woman and the sort of wealth that they have. So we should be looking for an answer choice that talks about that. Ignorance of the woman? No, that doesn't make sense. Seems authenticity by providing detailed descriptions of the woman. It doesn't show the authenticity, the realness of the scene. Emphasize the narrator's contempt. She doesn't show contempt. She admires them. She sort of envies them a little bit. Develop the narrator's portrayal of Carrie's intense admiration of privileged women. This makes sense, and it goes along with the questions and the wealth that's portrayed in the questions. So that's the answer for number 5. Number 6, which choice provides the best evidence that the narrator does not share Carrie's view of the type of play that Carrie attends? So lines 20 through 22. It ached her to know that she was not one of them, that alas, this just shows that Carrie's sort of an outsider. That doesn't really make sense. Lines 28 through 31. Such bon mots are never enticing to those who have all their days longed for such material surroundings and have never had them gratified. This sort of shows that the narrator's is sort of looking down and doesn't have the same view as Carrie has, because first of all, she calls them bon mots. Such bon mots are ever enticing to those. So when the narrator says such bon mots are ever enticing to those, the narrator is sort of indicating that the narrator himself or herself is not a part of the group that Carrie is in, because she's referring to the group that is enticed with such bon mots as those people, a group outside of the narrator. So B is going to be the correct answer for number 6. Number 7, based on the passage, Carrie regards her day-to-day lifestyle as one that is. So if we recall, we looked at the passage and she talked about how she had never achieved what she had expected. So we can answer this question. We should be looking for an answer choice that talks about how her daily life or her day-to-day lifestyle has not helped her achieve this sort of elegant and rich lifestyle that she wanted. And really, the correct answer choice is A. Not been conducive to helping her achieve her ambitions. Her ambitions are living a rich lifestyle, living a sort of grand lifestyle. But her day-to-day life has not helped her reach this goal. Which choice provides the best evidence to the previous question? We can see here in around line 22 through 24, the lines that we just talked about. So the answer to number 8 will be A. Number 9, according to the passage, as Carrie views the play, she envies which aspect of the characters' lives? Okay, so as she watches the play, she talks about here around in line 25. They suffer the pangs of love and jealousy amid gilded surroundings. They have the charm of showing suffering under ideal conditions. So she really talks about how, even though these rich people, they suffer, they go through troubles, they go through love, jealousy, they go through breakups, they go through, troubles. They're able to go through such troubles in a rich way, in an elegant way. And that's really what she envies about their lives. Their lack of everyday problems, they still have problems, so A is wrong. Their ability to forget the past, no, that's just not talked about. Their opportunity to bear their sufferings in fortunate circumstances. This makes a lot of sense. Their open indifference to material possessions. This is just completely off topic, so the correct answer for number 9 is C. Number 10, according to the passage, Carrie judges the performance of the actress who played the hero's sweetheart as. So if you recall later in this, she talks about how the woman had won Carrie's heart. You know, her acting was really good because Carrie could feel the anguish that the actor portrayed, but at the same time, despite the fact that the actor was good, Carrie felt like she could have done some stuff better herself. So while Carrie was really moved by the actor's performance, she felt that she could have done better in some parts of the act. So A, inferior in certain respects to the performance that she believes herself to be capable of giving. This makes sense, and it goes along with the fact that Carrie could have given a better performance in some regards than the actor of the play. So number 10, the answer will be A. And that concludes our analysis and our review of the first literature passage. Moving on to passage 2. This passage and accompanying figures are adapted from Giovanni Frazzetto, Joy, Guilt, Anger, Love, What Neuroscience Can and Can't Tell Us About How We Feel. Dr. Anna Abraham wanted to find out whether the brain operates by different mechanisms when it is exposed to a situation that is real as opposed to one that is entirely fictional. So she designed an interesting fMRI-based experiment that explored the brain's reactions to situations that involved either real or fictional characters. Okay, so this is sort of the basis of the study. Dr. Abraham wants to find out how the brain reacts to situations that are real compared to situations that are fake. Participants were shown one-sentence written scenarios in which a person named Peter was involved in situations that included George Bush or Cinderella. Okay, so obviously a real character, George Bush, or Cinderella, a fictional character. In one set of situations, Peter simply received information about both characters. The other set of situations involved direct interactions with the characters. What participants had to do was simple. They had to decide whether the scenarios portrayed were possible or not. That is, if they could indeed happen in the physical reality of the world we live in. How does the brain operate when assessing these two different types of scenarios? The results were intriguing. Common to both types of situations was some level of mental activity in parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus, that are at work when we, in general, recall facts or events. So in both cases, both real and fake events, the hippocampus was active in the brain. Such activity was detectable regardless of the nature of the scenario. That is, whether the scenario was informative when Peter only heard about the characters or interactive when he actually met the characters. So no matter if the scenario was informative or interactive, the hippocampus was always active in the brain. However, there were a few striking finer distinctions in activity relative to the two scenarios, and these depended on the type of character involved. When exposed to scenarios featuring George Bush, a famous real person, the brain involved the anterior medial prefrontal cortex, AMPFC, and the precuneus and posterior cingulate cortex, PCC. The AMPFC and the PCC are medial parts of the brain that are involved in autobiographical memory retrieval as well as self-referential thinking. So again, let's highlight George Bush. When exposed to scenarios featuring a real character, we see this AMPFC and as well as the PCC. When fictional characters were featured, the brain responded somewhat differently. Okay, so fictional characters, parts of the lateral frontal lobe, such as the inferior frontal gyrus, IFG, were more active. The IFG is thought to provide mirroring capacities, but is also involved in high-level language processing. The fact that George Bush was linked to personal memory retrieval, but Cinderella was not, led researchers to think that a crucial difference when assessing real or fictional scenarios might lie not so much in degree of realness to the character involved, but in their relevance to our reality. To test this hypothesis, they peered into the brain of 19 new volunteers who, as in the previous study, were asked to assess the possibility that a real protagonist could either imagine, hear, or dream about or actually interact with a set of characters. However, this time the characters involved in the scenarios were ranked in 3 categories with differing degrees of personal relevance for the participants. Their friends or family, high personal relevance. Famous people, medium relevance, and fictional characters, low personal relevance. As predicted, the activation in the AMPFC and PCC was indeed proportionally modulated by the degree of relevance of the characters described. It was highest in the case of friends and family members and lowest in the case of fictional characters. The researchers gave the following explanation. When you encounter real characters, even if you have never met them, they will integrate into a wide, comprehensive, and intricately connected structure in the conceptual storage of your mind. You are familiar with their basic behavioral features as human beings. You know more or less how they think, what kind of opinions they may produce. You are aware of the range of emotions that you can expect from them. By contrast, your mind is not equally familiar with fictional characters. Not equally familiar. No matter how much we know about the world of a fictional character, there will still be something alien and inscrutable to us about that world. You may have read all the books about a fictional character, but the amount of information you have gathered about the character is still definitely limited compared with the wealth of information that is available to you about members of your family, friends, or famous real people who are part of your immediate and past experience. Basically, in order to understand a fictional character, you need to dig deeper into your imagination. Dig deeper. Because he or she is bound up to fewer nodes of reference. Okay, so there are fewer points of reference in your network than are real or relevant people in your life. Okay, so let's move on to the questions. Oh, actually here we have 2 graphs. So we see that the change in activity is higher in real people and interactive scenarios. And it is also highest in fictional characters and interactive scenarios in the IFG. So this is the IFG and this is the PCC. Okay, so number 11. The main purpose of the passage is to advocate for more research. This is wrong. It doesn't talk about how more research is needed. It never talks about that, so A is wrong. Inform the reader about the results of experiments on brain functions. Does it talk about the results of experiments? Yes. Are these experiments on the function of the brain? Yes. So B is a very logical answer. C, explore how the brain processes factual information. It doesn't, talk about how exactly the brain processes factual information. It sort of more accurately talks about the functions of the brain and how it deals with different situations. Argue that the way the brain processes fictional situations is widely misunderstood. We never reference a widely misunderstood topic. We talk about the brain function and only that. There is no misunderstanding. As used in line 19, operate most nearly means. How does the brain operate when assessing these 2 different types of scenarios? How does the brain work when put under these 2 different types of scenarios? How does the brain function under these 2 different types of scenarios? And we can see that choice C is function. So that's the answer for number 12. Number 13, which choice best supports the claim that there are important similarities between how the brain responds to scenarios involving real people and how it responds to those involving fictional people? So I recall in the passage we talked about the activity of the hippocampus. It talked about how in lines 24, such activity was detectable regardless of the nature of the scenario, whether it is informative or interactive. So we can see that. So we should be looking around the 3rd paragraph. And we can see that if we actually look at the answer choices, lines 21 through 24, starting common to both types of situations with some level of mental activity in parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus. So that's the answer for number 13. Number 13 is A. Number 14. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that the results of Abraham's experiments showed that A, interactive scenarios resulted in finer distinctions in brain activity than did informative scenarios. Finer distinctions. We never talk about how, interactive scenarios result in this sort of finer, more detailed, more distinct, more, fine results in brain activity. So A is not really seen in the passage, so we can't choose that as an answer. Both interactive and informative scenarios required memory recall. Let's look back at the passage to look for this idea of memory recall. Here, around in lines 21, 22, 23. Common to both types of situations, so both interactive and informative, there was some level of mental activity in parts of the brain, such as the hippocampus, that are at work when we, in general, recall facts or events. So this is a direct answer to the question because it shows that in both interactive and informative scenarios, memory recall is required. So number 14 will be B. Number 15. The greatest increase in activity in the AMPFC of a research subject's brain would most likely be observed in scenarios in which a real character. If we recall, the AMPFC is the anterior medial prefrontal cortex, and it is most active when it talks about a real person, a person that maybe someone is familiar with. So knowing that, would it be most active in a conversation with a real person who is unknown to the subject? Unknown is not inducive of increase in activity. Interacts with real people who are childhood friends of the subject. They're very familiar with them. So the AMPFC is more likely to be active because of this degree of familiarity. So B seems correct. Encounters a fictional character. Okay, this is automatically wrong because the fictional character doesn't involve the AMPFC, but it actually involves the IFG. Is told about a real person the subject has previously met. Previously met isn't as familiar as the subject that's a childhood friend. The childhood friend will be more familiar to the subject, so the AMPFC will be more active in the case of B. So 15 is B. Number 16 asks for the best evidence to the previous question. So if we really look at the place where it talks about the relevance, we can see that, in lines 35, it talks about the AMPFC being related to a famous real person, but more accurately, we can see here in lines 62, as predicted, the activation in the AMPFC and PCC was indeed proportionally modulated by the degree of relevance the characters described. So as the degree of relevance increased, the activation of the AMPFC and the PCC increased as well. So this occurs in around line 60 to 64, and so for that reason, we can choose a C for number 16. Number 17, according to the passage, the brain stores information about famous real people. So again, this real people. So we should be comparing real people to fictional people in order to allow efficient retrieval later. This is not the definitive reason for storing information about famous real people, and we can't, support this with evidence from the text, so we can't choose A. B, exactly as it stores information about close friends or family members. We already said that there's a difference in the way the brain stores information, so B is just factually incorrect. In different areas, depending on the type of contact one has with them. Famous real people, there was never a distinction made between famous real people. So C is not like a good answer. D, in a network of memories broader in scope than memories about fictional people. Well, since we already eliminated the other three answers, we can probably choose D, but we should be able to find something in the text that backs this up. So we can see towards the end of the passage, they really talk about how the brain processes and stores information about famous people. We can see in lines around 69, 68, the researchers gave the following explanation. When you encounter real characters, even if you have never met them, similar to famous people, they'll integrate into a wide, comprehensive, and intricately connected structure in the conceptual storage of your mind, into a wide and broad, into a network of memories broader in scope than memories about fictional people. So number 17 is D, and we can really point to sort of the beginning of the last paragraph as evidence to choice D. Number 18, as used in line 80, alien most nearly means. Line 80. By contrast, next sentence, no matter how much we know about the world of a fictional character, there will still be something alien, something unknown, sort of something that we aren't familiar with about this character and about the character's world. So the best word that works in context here is foreign, because foreign means sort of unknown, unfamiliar territory, and it matches with the use of the word alien in line 80. So number 18 is B. Number 19, according to figure 1, the percent increase in the activity of PCC in subjects relating to a scenario in which someone has a conversation with a real person, okay? PCC and real person. So let's just look at that. So PCC is figure 1 and real person. Did it talk about conversation? So because they're having a conversation with a real person, we know that it's going to be an interactive scenario. So once again, we see a real person, interactive. So here, this black line, real person, interactive scenario. And we can see that it's around between 0.1% and 0.15%, around 0.13, 0.14, that area. So the answer for number 19 is C. Number 20, according to figure 1 and figure 2, the highest percent change in activity in any of the studied areas of the brain was in, okay, so the highest bar. Here we see that real people interactive scenario in PCC was around 0.13, as we just figured out. But here we see an even higher bar. We see in the IFG, in fictional characters, interactive scenarios, it's around 0.3. So we should be looking for an answer choice that talks about IFG, fictional characters, and interactive scenarios. And if we look at question or answer choice B, rather, we see that IFG is talked about and an interactive scenario involving fictional people. So number 20 is going to be B. And that concludes the questions for this passage. Moving on to the third passage. This passage is adapted from David Grimm, The Genes That Turned Wildcats into Kitty Cats. Place a house cat next to its direct ancestor, the Near Eastern wildcat, and it may take you a minute to spot the difference. They're about the same size and shape, and well, they both look like cats. So this is sort of like a humorous bit. Obviously, they're both cats, but they also have some differences. But the wildcat is fierce and feral, whereas the house cat, thanks to nearly 10,000 years of domestication, is tame and adaptable enough to have become the world's most popular pet. So the cats have sort of evolved from this fierce and feral animal, these wild animals, to the world's most popular pet over 10,000 years. Now scientists have begun to pinpoint the genetic changes that drove this remarkable transformation. So what genetic changes did these cats undergo to change from being wild to being domesticated? The findings, based on the first high-quality sequence of the cat genome, could shed light on how other creatures become tame. This is the closest thing to a smoking gun we've ever had, said Gregor Larson, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Oxford in the UK, who has studied the domestication of pigs, dogs, and other animals. We're much closer to understanding the nitty-gritty of domestication than we were a decade ago. Cats first entered human society about 9,500 years ago, not long after people first took up farming in the Middle East. Drawn to rodents that had invaded grain stores, wildcats slunk out of the deserts and into villages. There, many scientists suspect they mostly domesticated themselves. So humans didn't domesticate them, they domesticated themselves, with the friendliest ones able to take advantage of human table scraps and protection. Over thousands of years, cats shrank slightly in size, acquired a panoply of coat colors and patterns, and largely shed the antisocial tendencies of their past. Domestic animals from cows to dogs have undergone similar transformations, yet scientists know relatively about the genes involved. Researchers led by Michael Montague, a postdoc at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, have now pinpointed some of them. They've pinpointed some of the genes that have changed to domesticate animals. The scientists started with the genome of a domestic cat, a female Abyssinian, that had been published in draft form in 2007, then filled in missing sequences and identified genes. They compared the resulting genome with those of cows, tigers, dogs, and humans. The analysis, published recently in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, revealed 281 genes that show signs of rapid or numerous genetic changes, a hallmark of recent selections in domestic cats. Some appear to be involved in hearing and vision, the senses that felines rely on most. Others play a role in fat metabolism and are likely an adaptation to cats' highly carnivorous lifestyle. But the most intriguing findings came when the team sequenced the genomes of 22 domestic cats representing a wide variety of breeds and locations and compared them with the genomes of 2 Near Eastern and 2 European wild cats. The researchers uncovered at least 13 genes that changed as cats morphed from feral to friendly. Some of these, based on previous studies of knockout mice, seem to play a role in cognition, including fear responses and the ability to learn new behaviors when given food rewards. That jibes with what we know about the domestication of cats, Montague says, because they would have needed to become less fearful of new locations and individuals, and the promise of food would have kept them sticking around. This is my favorite part of the paper, says Kirsten Lindblad-Toe, a leading comparative genomicist at Uppsala University in Sweden, who was not involved in the work. She notes that a few of the genes the team identified code for glutamate receptors, which play a key role in learning and memory and may have been selected in humans as well. We're hitting on genes that allow our brains to develop and make us interact socially. The team also found 5 genes in domestic cats that influence the migration of neural crest cells. Influence the migration of these cells. Stem cells in the developing embryo that affect everything from skull shape to color. This supports a recent proposal that such cells may be the master control switches of domestication, explaining why domestic animals share common traits, such as smaller brains and certain pigmentation patterns. So why are cats still a bit wilder than our other favorite domesticate, the dog? Co-author William Murphy, a geneticist at Texas A&M University College Station, says the cat genome appears to have undergone less intense and more recent evolutionary pressure than that of dogs. That's not surprising, considering that dogs may have lived with us for up to 30,000 years. Cats were not selected for a purpose like dogs and other domesticates, Murphy speculates. So to conclude, the passage says that the reason why there's a difference between the evolution of cats and dogs was because dogs were selected for a distinct purpose. They were domesticated to, maybe herd cattle or something. But cats were not selected for a purpose, so that's why they sort of evolved at a slower rate, maybe. Okay, moving on to the questions. Number 21. The main purpose of the passage is to summarize a study of the genetic differences between various breeds of domestic cats. We aren't talking about, the differences between house cats, so A is wrong. Describe findings regarding the benefits that cats provided to humans. This, again, is not really talked about. Discuss research into the genetic changes that cats underwent as part of domestication. This is really just the only viable answer, because if we look back at the passage, we only are talking about the genes and the genetic changes and not any of this other stuff. Present experimental evidence contrasting the behavior. Okay, so the behavior is not really talked about, so D is wrong. 21 is C. Number 22, the author includes the phrase, and well, line 4, most likely to. So line 4. They're about the same size and shape, and well, they both look like cats. So this is sort of in a sort of funny way, not directly funny, but in a sort of funny way. There's noting an obvious difference, or not an obvious difference, but rather an obvious similarity between the Near Eastern wildcat and the house cat, because the similarity is, well, they both look like cats. So if we look at the answer choices, stress that the relationship between wildcats and domestic cats is continually shifting. No, it's kind of just pointing out that they're obvious similarities. Discussion of the physical attributes. No. Advance a tentative hypothesis. No. Acknowledge the obviousness of a similarity between wildcats and domestic cats. This makes the most sense. 22 is D. 23. The passage suggests that some scientists would agree with which statement about the domestication of cats? It did not occur until after the domestication of cows and pigs. We don't really see a time frame. We don't know which domesticated first. We know that dogs came before cats, but we don't know the relation between cats and cows and pigs. So A is wrong. It caused cats to slightly increase in size. Size is not something that's talked about. It was not intentionally undertaken by humans. This we can point to direct evidence in the passage that supports this, because again, around line 93, cats were not selected for a purpose like dogs and other domesticates. Cats were not intentionally domesticated by humans. Okay, and D, it resulted from humans' need for pets. This is just not talked about, and it's wrong, because there was no reason for humans to domesticate cats. So D is wrong. Which choice best provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? If we look back, lines 25 through 28, there many scientists suspect they mostly domesticated themselves. Okay, so this also shows that humans were not the ones to domesticate cats. So there was no purpose for humans to domesticate cats, because the cats domesticated themselves. So number 24 will be A. 25, which choice best describes how Montague's team achieved the results discussed in the 6th paragraph? So which choice best describes the experimental setup that Montague's team used? So let's see here. The team sequenced the genomes of 22 domestic cats, representing a wide variety of breeds and locations, and compared them with the genomes of 2 Near Eastern and 2 European wildcats. So this is sort of the setup that they used. We should be looking for an answer choice that talks about that. Sequenced the genomes of 22 breeds of domestic cats from around the world, compared these genomes to one another, and identified the genes that appeared to have changed as a result of breeding. This does not make sense. They did not compare the genes of domestic cats to one another. B, the team used a previously published genome sequence of a domestic cat to locate the genes associated with hearing. Okay, this is just completely off topic to what we read in the passage, so B certainly isn't correct. C, the team sequenced the genomes of several breeds of geographically diverse domestic cats, compared those genomes to the genomes of 4 wildcats from 2 locations, and identified the genes that appear to have changed due to domestication. So, do we talk about geographically diverse domestic cats? 22 cats representing a wide variety of breeds and locations. Okay, that makes sense. And they compared them to 4 wildcats from 2 locations. So 4 wildcats in total. We have 2 plus 2, that's 4, and 2 locations, the Near Eastern and European. So C will be the correct answer choice for number 25. Number 26, as presented in the passage, Montague's explanation for the gene changes in domestic cats is based on the assumption that. So what is sort of an assumption that Montague's study really undertook to do their research? So let's look. Here is the paragraph that talks about Montague's research. And they sort of talk about uncovering 13 genes that changed as cats morphed from feral to friendly, okay? Some of these based on previous studies of knockout mice. So here they are making the assumption that, there's a correlation between the genes in these sort of knockout mice that they're using and the genes of European wildcats. So we should be looking for an answer choice that talks about an assumption that there's a correlation between genetics makeups of mice and cats. Genes associated with particular characteristics in one species are associated with similar characteristics in other species. This makes sense because, as we just talked about, the particular characteristics in mice are sort of associated with the particular characteristics in cats. So A is the correct answer for number 26. Number 27 asks for the best evidence for number 26. And since we talked about sort of lines 59 through 62 in this, we can choose answer choice C for number 27. Number 28, according to the passage, the discovery that some genes in domestic cats influence the migration of neural crest cells is important because neural crest cells are. So if we look back, what sort of purpose do neural crest cells serve? This supports a recent proposal that such cells may be the master control switches of domestication, explaining why domestic animals share common traits, such as smaller brains and certain pigmentation patterns. So sort of neural crest cells, to answer the question, are sort of the masters to domestication. Likely to be overlooked in analyses regarding evolution. They're not overlooked if they're sort of the fundamental part of domestication. So A is wrong. Potentially responsible for domestic animals, ability to thrive in harsh environments. This isn't talked about, so we can't choose it. Thought to be fundamental to the overall process of domestication. Fundamental, that sort of goes along with the master control switches of domestication. So C will be the correct answer for number 28. Number 29, as used in line 83, common traits most nearly means. Line 83, explaining why domestic animals share common traits. Common traits sort of means here the shared characteristics between domestic animals. Similar features between domestic animals. They all have smaller brains and certain pigmentation patterns. These are sort of a common trait, a similar feature, something along those lines. And if we look at the answer choices, we see that D, similar features, is most close to the meaning of common traits. So 29 is D. Number 30. The author most likely includes the quotation in the last sentence of the passage. The last sentence, cats were not selected for a purpose like dogs and other domesticates, Murphy speculates. So without looking at the answer choices, I would say the answer choice would have to talk about how cats, unlike dogs and other domesticates, were not selected for a certain reason. So it provides sort of an explanation for why cats are different from other domesticates. A, offer an alternative to a generally accepted beliefs about the domestication of cats. There is no alternative. There is no generally accepted beliefs that's talked about in the quote, so A is wrong. Suggest a potential explanation for the distinct way in which domestic cats developed. So this is sort of what we talked about, because the reason that cats evolved and were domesticated differently than dogs and other domesticates like cows and pigs was because cats were not selected for a purpose. So this is a potential explanation. So B will be the correct answer for number 30. Moving on to the fourth passage, the history passage. Passage 1 is adapted from a speech delivered in 1854 by Stephen Douglas, defense of the Kansas-Nebraska bill. In 1854, Douglas, a senator from Illinois, proposed a bill allowing voters in the new territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide whether slavery should be permitted there. When enacted, the bill would effectively repeal the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which prohibited slavery in these territories. Passage 2 is adapted from a speech delivered in 1856 by Charles Sumner, The Crime Against Kansas. Sumner was a senator from Massachusetts. Passage 1. The argument of my opponents is predicated upon the assumption that the policy of the fathers of the Republic was to prohibit slavery, in all the territories ceded by the old states to the Union and made United States territory for the purpose of being organized into new states. I take issue upon that statement. You find upon the statutes, books under Washington, and the early president's provisions of law showing that in the southwestern territories the right to hold slaves was clearly implied or recognized, while in the northwest territories it was prohibited. The only conclusion that can be fairly and honestly drawn from that legislation is that it was the policy of the fathers of the Republic to prescribe a line of demarcation between free territories and slaveholding territories by a natural or a geographical line, being sure to make that line correspond as near as might be to the laws of the climate, of production, and probably of all those other causes that would control the institution and make it either desirable or undesirable to the people inhabiting the respective territories. So here, Douglas is basically saying it's not clearly implied in the Constitution what the role of slavery in America is. He says that the role of the fathers of the Republic was just to prescribe a line dividing the United States into, possible free and slaveholding territories. So he continues. Now I ask the friends and the opponents of this measure to look at it as it is. Look at it as it is.
Is not the question involved a simple one, whether the people of the territory shall be allowed to do as they please upon the question of slavery, subject only to the limitations of the Constitution? So, is this allowed by the Constitution? Douglas says the question is very simple. Is the fact that people will be able to choose whether their state will be slave or free, is that within the regulations of the Constitution? That's the question that I'm asking. That is all the bill provides, and it does so in a clear, explicit, and unequivocal terms. I do not wish to deal in any unequivocal language. If the principle is right, let it be avowed and maintained. If it is wrong, let it be repudiated. Let all this quibbling about the Missouri Compromise, about the territory acquired from France, about the Act of 1820 be cast behind you. For the simple question is, will you allow the people to legislate for themselves upon the subject of slavery? Why should you not? So here in the end, Douglas is basically saying, let's not complicate, this simple question with questions about the Missouri Compromise, with the questions about the territory acquired from France, about the Act of 1820. It's a very simple question. Let's not, get besides the point. Let's not involve some other complicated stuff. It's a very simple question. And the simple question is, will you allow the people to legislate themselves upon the subject of slavery or not? Will you let individual states decide whether they're slave or free or not? That is the fundamental question that Douglas wants to ask. Now let's look at passage 2. The Nebraska bill was in every respect a swindle. So if you swindle someone, it's like you kind of cheat them. You're kind of like taking advantage of them. It was a swindle by the South of the North. It was on the part of those who had already completely enjoyed their share of the Missouri Compromise, a swindle of those whose share was yet absolutely untouched. It was a swindle of a broad territory, thus cheated of protection against slavery. It was a swindle of a great cause, early espoused by Washington, Franklin, and Jefferson, surrounded by the best fathers of the Republic. Sir, it was a swindle of the God-given inalienable rights. Turn it over, look at it on all sides, and it is everywhere a swindle. And if the word I now employ has not the authority of a classical usage, it has on this occasion the indubitable authority of fitness. No other word will adequately express the mingled meanness and wickedness of the cheat. So here in the first paragraph, Sumner is repeating the word swindle to give this idea that, the Kansas-Nebraska bill has really cheated people out of their rights. They have cheated the people in these states out of their sovereignty. Its character was still further apparent in the general structure of the bill. Amid overflowing professions of regard for the sovereignty of the people in the territory, they were despoiled of every essential privilege of sovereignty. So amid overflowing professions of regard, amid, the sort of promises for sovereignty, the high regard held for sovereignty, even though there's a high regard for sovereignty sort of in the general structure of the bill, people were still, had their essential privilege of sovereignty taken away from them in the end. So even though this bill sort of, promises sovereignty, holds sovereignty in high regard, people were still taken, people's sovereignty, their rights were basically taken away. They were not allowed to choose their governor, secretary, chief justice, associate justices, attorney, or marshal, all of whom are sent from Washington. Nor were they allowed to regulate the salaries of any of these functionaries, or the daily allowance of the legislative body, or even pay the clerks and doorkeepers, but they were left free to adopt slavery. And this was called popular sovereignty. Time does not allow, nor does the occasion require, that I should stop to dwell on this transparent device to cover a transcendent wrong. Suffice it to say that slavery is in itself an arrogant denial of human rights, and by no human reason can the power to establish such a wrong be placed among the attributes of any just sovereignty. In refusing it such a place, I do not deny popular rights. But I uphold them. I do not restrain popular rights, but extend them. And sir, to this conclusion you must yet come, unless deaf not only to the admissions of political justice, but also to the genius of our own Constitution, under which, when the Constitution is properly interpreted, no valid claim for slavery can be set up anywhere in the national territory. So we can see that this is a fundamental difference between the first passage and the second passage, because whereas in the first passage, Douglas is saying, looking at the Constitution, slavery can be permitted without, sort of doing the Constitution wrong, without violating the terms of the Constitution. Whereas in the second passage, Sumner is basically saying that by introducing slavery, you are fundamentally, going against the Constitution, what is written in the Constitution. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at the questions. Number 31, as used in line 12, recognized most nearly means. Okay, here in line 12, you find upon the statute books under Washington and the early president's provisions of law showing that in the southwestern territories the right to hold slaves was clearly implied or recognized. Recognized here, in context, I feel like it kind of means allowed. The right to hold slaves was allowed. The right to hold slaves was acknowledged by sort of the presidents, the government. So, let's look back at the answer choices. A, formally acknowledged. This makes a lot of sense in context. The right to hold slaves was clearly implied or formally acknowledged. This right meaning acknowledged by acknowledged meaning given or allowed by the people to hold slaves. Publicly commended. Commended means to sort of praise something. And this doesn't really make sense in context. Confessed, recalled. Again, these don't make sense in context, so number 31 will be A. Number 32, in passage 1, Douglas implies that the legislator's consideration of the bill he has proposed has been clouded by. Okay, so by clouded, he means like the focus has been lost or something has been, distracting from the main point. So if we recall, late in this passage, around lines 30 or something, he says, let all this quibbling about the Missouri Compromise, about the territory acquired from France, about the Act of 1820 be cast behind you. Because he believes that sort of these arguments are clouding the overall basic simple question that he is trying to ask. And that question being, will you allow people to legislate for slavery or not by themselves? So looking at the answer choices, we should be looking for an answer that talks about that. Moral dilemmas, no. Emphatic language that characterizes the text of the bill, no. Discussion of issues that are fundamentally beside the point. This makes a lot of sense because, again, the talk about the Missouri Compromise, the territory acquired from France, the Act of 1820, these are all issues that are fundamentally beside the point. Fundamentally beside the point of his simple question. And lines 33, not line 33, but question 33 rather, is just the best evidence question. And we can see that lines 33 through 36, the lines that we just pointed out, include evidence. So 33 is D and 32 is C. Number 34, the repetition of swindle in the first paragraph of passage 2 has the main effect of creating. So when we first analyzed this passage, we talked about how swindle was used to talk about how people were cheated of protection against slavery. People's rights were taken away from them. We talked about how slavery was mean and wicked, and this bill was really wrong. So we should be looking for that. A skeptical tone that reveals Sumner's distrust of his fellow senators, not talked about in the passage. So this is wrong. Outraged tone, okay, we can see that expresses Sumner's indignation over the Kansas-Nebraska bill. This makes a lot of sense. It does show his sort of how he's mad that such a bill was passed because it obviously cheats people. And he's obviously dissatisfied with the bill. So B so far makes sense as an answer. Pessimistic tone that reflects Sumner's conviction that the Kansas-Nebraska Act cannot be repealed. The repealment of the Kansas-Nebraska Act isn't talked about, so C is wrong. And I wouldn't say that the tone is, pessimistic. An aggrieved tone that shows Sumner's sense of betrayal over the Founding Fathers' support for slavery. We don't see the Founding Fathers' support for slavery in sort of the first paragraph where he uses swindle, so D is not right. One of Sumner's central claims in passage 2 is that the Kansas-Nebraska bill had the effect of disrupting the balance of authority between slaveholding and non-slaveholding territorial governments. This balance isn't really talked about. We're more so talking about the rights that are being alienated. B, depriving a federal policy. Okay, what is this federal policy exactly? That enjoyed widespread popularity of its legitimacy. This just does not make sense. It doesn't match along with sort of the main claim that Sumner is trying to make. Disenfranchising citizens in territories where the Missouri Compromise had yielded no obvious benefits. So I see a lot of problems with this answer choice, and the first of which is the definition of disenfranchising, which means not allowing someone to cast a vote. And this isn't really talked about. Slavery is sort of the main and the only focus of this passage, so we can't be talking about disenfranchisement. So C is wrong. So that leaves D as the answer, but of course we should be able to find evidence, giving the impression that the rights of citizens in certain territories were being expanded when they were in fact being curtailed. So this, I can point to a specific line in the passage where it talks about this, because it talks about how amid overflowing professions of regard for the sovereignty of the people in the territory. This gives the impression that the rights of citizens were being expanded because, the sovereignty of the citizens was being held high in regard, overflowing professions of regard for sovereignty. But in fact, the reality was, as stated in answer choice D, they were being curtailed. The rights were being taken away. And we can see here around in line 60, it says they were not, the sovereignty wasn't held high in regard. They were despoiled of every essential privilege of sovereignty. So we can really see evidence in around line 60 to 61 for answer choice D. And if we look at question number 36, which is the best evidence question following 35, we can see that, again, lines 58 through 61, the lines that we just talked about, provide the best evidence for number 35. So number 35 is D, and number 36 is D. 36 is B, sorry. Okay, moving on to the next question. Number 37. In passage 2, Sumner indicates that under the Kansas-Nebraska bill, the national government had the authority to... Okay, so when we talk about sort of the national, the authority of the national government, I recall one place where they talked about the national government choosing the governor's secretary chief. Here we see in line 63, they were not allowed to choose their governor, secretary, chief justice, associate justices, all of whom were sent from Washington. So the national government in Washington was deciding the governor, secretary, chief, et cetera, of these territories. So we can see that 37D is the correct answer. Appoint officials to territorial posts because, again, Washington is sending the governor, secretary, chief justice, associate justices, attorney marshal to these territorial areas. So D is the answer to number 37. Number 38. In context of Sumner's argument, lines 76 through 77, in refusing, ending them, serve primarily to... lines 76 through 77. In refusing at such a place, I do not deny popular rights, but uphold them. I do not restrain popular rights, but extend them. So he is saying that by refusing slavery, he is actually doing good. He is allowing people to have this popular sovereignty and allowing people to have their popular rights. So let's look for an answer choice. Reiterate that he shares certain fundamental values with the supporters of slavery. This is just factually wrong. Provide an explanation for his claims about the historical legacy. Okay, historical legacy isn't a main focus here. Rephrase an opinion on abolition that he offered earlier in his speech. It's not rephrasing an opinion. And argue that his position on slavery constitutes authentic popular sovereignty. This is the best answer, I think, because in saying that, in refusing slavery, he is not denying popular rights but upholding them. He is not restraining popular rights but extending them. He is, in essence, saying that his position on slavery, his decision or his belief that slavery is unethical and should be abolished, constitutes authentic popular sovereignty because it upholds popular rights and it extends popular rights. So D is going to be the correct answer for 38. Number 39. Which choice best identifies a distinction in how Douglas and Sumner characterized the Nebraska bill? Kansas-Nebraska bill. So let's see. Douglas, I remember, or you should be able to remember, that he talks about the question as a very simple question. He says here in lines 36, it's very simple. He thinks the essence of the Kansas-Nebraska bill is very straightforward. And Sumner, in passage 2, talks about how it's very fundamentally wrong and it's very unfair and it's taking stuff away from the people. He talks about, on the surface, it looks like people's sovereignty is in high regard, but in reality, people's rights are being taken away. So let's look at that. A. Douglas characterizes it as straightforward in its intent, while Sumner characterizes it as fundamentally deceptive. This makes a lot of sense because, again, straightforward is similar to how Douglas talks about it being a very simple question, simple and straightforward. And Sumner characterizes that fundamentally deceptive. Again, he talks about here in line 60. How's it deceptive? Well, it seems like the Kansas-Nebraska bill is, holding sovereignty in high regard, but in reality, it is, taking away every essential privilege of sovereignty. This is how it's deceptive. It's actually taking away rights instead of giving people rights. So A is going to be the correct answer for number 39. Number 40, Sumner would most likely fault the simple question in lines 36 through 37 proposed by Douglas in passage 1 for being, 36 through 37. The simple question is, will you allow the people to legislate for themselves upon the subject of slavery? Why should you not? Okay, let's see. Biased, since it places the interests of territories over those of established states. There's never really talk by Sumner about, territories over established states or established states over territories. It's about slavery and slavery only. So A is not irrelevant. B, irrelevant since territorial citizens already have the freedom to legislate on local matters. This is just factually incorrect. Misleading since it fails to acknowledge that certain provisions of the Kansas-Nebraska bill are unrelated to territorial sovereignty. Again, we see this sovereignty here, but the fundamental premise, the fundamental argument that Sumner has to make is that slavery is sort of denying popular rights. It's taking away rights from people, and it's a denial of human rights. And by giving people the choice to use slavery or not, you're taking away people's rights. So we should be looking for an answer choice that talks about that. So that for that reason, C is not the correct answer either. D, immoral. Okay, this immediately jumps out because Sumner does talk about slavery being immoral. Immoral since it focuses on the political rights of territorial citizens at the expense of the human rights of slaves. This makes a lot of sense because, again, the immorality that Choice D talks about, the immorality of the slavery, of the institution of slavery, is really the focus of Sumner's argument. He talks about how it's taking away essential privileges of sovereignty. He talks about how slavery is in and of itself an arrogant denial of human rights. So he would most likely, as in answer choice D, say that this simple question, doesn't take into account the rights of the slaves and the rights of the people. It, focuses on territorial people's rights. And in that way, it's immoral because you're taking away human rights. So D is the correct answer for number 40. Number 41, the last question on this passage. Which choice best identifies a key difference in how Douglas and Sumner make use of the Constitution? So without looking at the answer choices, Douglas really says that slavery should be allowed. Or not should be allowed, but states should be able to choose whether slavery is allowed because it doesn't go against the ideals stated in the Constitution. While Sumner takes a very, very different view. He says here in around line 81 through 82, when you properly interpret the Constitution, no valid claim for slavery can be set up anywhere in the national territory. So while Douglas sort of interprets the Constitution as sort of allowing slavery, Sumner says, no, the Constitution, when interpreted correctly, there should be no valid claim for slavery. And the only answer choice that sort of embodies this spirit by both of the authors is answer choice D for number 41. Douglas suggests that slavery may be permitted, while Sumner insists that slavery is not compatible with the ideals of the Constitution. There is something fundamentally wrong with slavery that, contrasts with the ideals of the Constitution. So 41 is going to be D. And that wraps up this history passage. The final passage of this SAT reading section, it's going to be a science passage. This passage and accompanying figure are adapted from Sandra M. Faber et al. Staring Back to Cosmic Dawn. The Hubble Space Telescope, HST, is a time machine staring not only billions of light years into the depths of space, but also billions of light years back in time. With its extraordinarily sensitive detectors above Earth's shrouding and blurring atmosphere, HST can witness the peak of star formation at cosmic high noon, which ended about 5 billion years after the Big Bang. And at the outer limits of its capabilities, we wondered if it could detect the faintest candles of creation, the earliest galaxies made of the earliest stars at cosmic dawn, when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. So basically, the passage opens by talking about the HST's ability to sort of look back in time. But at the same time, they're sort of wondering, can the HST be used to sort of explore the earliest galaxies at the earliest stars of the cosmic dawn? Those were the hopes of two of us authors, Faber and Ferguson, after NASA astronauts installed HST's Wide Field Camera, WFC-3, in 2009, which enabled Hubble to survey the infrared sky about 30 times faster than before. Within a few months, Hubble pointed the new camera at the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, HUDF, a tiny region in the constellation Fornax, only a tenth the diameter of the full moon, and took exposures totaling about 3 days. Those deep HUDF images revealed some of the most distant galaxies ever found, which look very different than nearby galaxies. But the HUDF represented just a pinprick poke at the universe. This is just a very small sample. The universe is so much bigger and there's so much more to explore. So we began an ambitious program at visible and near-infrared wavelengths as a natural successor to HUDF, the Cosmic Assembly Near-Infrared Deep Extragalactic Legacy Survey, CANDLES. We designed CANDLES primarily to document the first one-third of galaxy evolution. Okay, so here's the purpose of CANDLES, to document the first one-third of galaxy evolution. The program also would enable astronomers to search for the most distant Type 1a supernovae, exploding white dwarf stars that are the best-known standard candles for measuring the universe's recent expansion rate. Candles could thus test whether Type 1a supernovae are also a valid yardstick for the early universe. So candles, not only can it be used to document galaxy evolution, but it can also be used to test the legitimacy of Type 1a supernovae as a yardstick for the evolution of the early universe. CANDLES became the largest observing program ever undertaken by Hubble. The telescope devoted 600 hours, fully 10% of its observing time, to CANDLES for 3 years, surveying an area of sky 60 times larger than the HUDF, be it to brighter limiting magnitudes, about 27 for CANDLES compared to 30 for the HUDF. CANDLES targeted 5 patches on the northern and southern skies, each about 1/4 the angular size of the Orion Nebula, M42. Each patch has been well studied from radio to X-rays, giving plenty of complementary data across the electromagnetic spectrum. Because remote galaxies are so faint, the 5 target areas were away from our Milky Way star-studded plane. Much as pollsters and medical researchers learn about the human population as a whole by studying carefully selected samples of a small number of individuals, we chose the 5 target areas because they're physically representative of the universe at large. So here, the authors are basically talking about why they chose these 5 patches to study the skies. So their reasoning is similar to how people conduct surveys and polls to get a representative sample of a large population. They chose these 5 patches of sky to study because they were representative of the universe at large. Moving on, depending on the field, candles took multiple images with exposure times ranging from 40 minutes to roughly 3 hours through each of 2 or 3 infrared filters. Although candles surveyed a total area only about that of the full moon, the long exposures looked so deep into the cosmos that they recorded roughly 250,000 ancient galaxies in enough detail to reveal their sizes, their shapes, and even gross internal structures. Such a rich treasure trove provides powerful new data for statistical studies of galaxy growth and evolution. Astrophysicists will continue to analyze the wealth of observations for years to come. The data have already led to new findings and mysteries about the early universe. Okay, now let's move on to the questions. Oh, before we look at the questions, here we have a graph. Star formation rate since the Big Bang. So here along the top part of the x-axis, we have this unit redshift and time since the Big Bang along the bottom half, and star formation rate along the y-axis. Okay, number 42. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from A, an example of data collected using the HST. Okay, this is automatically wrong because if we look at the beginning, there is no like discrete example of data collected from the Hubble Space Telescope. And moreover, if we look later in this answer choice, design flaws, no, not talked about. So A is wrong. B, an explanation of a new theory of star formation. Okay, theory of star formation, irrelevant, automatically wrong. Moving on. C, a list of the author's accomplishments. Okay, that's just also irrelevant. So C is wrong. So we've eliminated all the answers, so the answer choice will be D, but we should be looking for evidence that can support D. An overview of the capabilities of HST. Does it talk about that? Yes, it does, because it talks about how the HST stares not only billions of light years into the depths of space, but also, it has sensitive detectors above the atmosphere, can witness the peak of star formation. It really talks about the capabilities of the Hubble Space Telescope. To discussion of research undertaken that utilize those capabilities. What is this research that the passage talks about? Well, the research is talking about the HUDF, the candles, and about, sort of the 5 patches that they talked about. The 5 patches that really look at early galaxy formation in our universe. So D is going to be the correct answer for number 42. Number 43, which choice best supports the conclusion that the first galaxies formed less than 1 billion years after the Big Bang? Okay, so lines 1 through 4, the Hubble time, okay, this doesn't, it mentions billions, but it doesn't talk about, formation of galaxies, so A is wrong. 4, with its ending Big Bang, with its extraordinary, okay, this is just talking about, sort of the specs of the Hubble Space Telescope, so that's wrong. C, 8 through 12, and at ending old. And at the outer limits of its capabilities, we wondered if it could detect the faintest candles of creation. The earliest galaxies made of the earliest stars at cosmic dawn, when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. This is, solid evidence that the first galaxies formed less than 1 billion years old after the Big Bang, because it says that the earliest galaxies were made when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. So less than 1 billion years old after the creation of the universe, after the Big Bang. So 43 is C. Number 44, based on the passage, what can reasonably be inferred about galaxies billions of years ago? A, they looked very different from galaxies of today. Is this true? If we look at around line 24, we do see concrete evidence. These deep HUDF images revealed some of the most distant, most earliest galaxies ever found, which look very different than nearby galaxies. So we can really point to that as evidence. So number 44 will be A. The galaxies of billions of years ago look very different from the galaxies of today. Number 45, as used in line 31, document most nearly means. Okay, document in lines 31. We designed candles primarily to document the first 1/3 of galaxy evolution. This seems like document is like record, to record the first 1/3 galaxy of evolution. They're trying to sort of make note of the first 1/3 of galaxy evolution. And we can see that C, record, is going to be the correct answer for number 45. If we plug in produce, define, construct in context, they really don't make sense. Produce the first 1/3 of galaxy production, no. Define, no. Construct the first, yeah, it just doesn't make sense in context. So 45 is C. 46, in context of the research described in passage, type 1a supernovae may be useful because they could allow astronomers to. Okay, let's take a look at what they talk about, what they say about, rather, type 1a supernovae. Okay, so here they talk about what it is: exploding white dwarf stars that are the best known standard candles for measuring the universe's recent expansion rate. So this gives a definitive answer to question number 46. What is the use of type 1a supernovae to astronomers? Well, it allows astronomers to measure the universe's recent expansion rate. So let's look for an answer that talks about that. A, determine the expansion rate of the universe soon after the Big Bang. This is exactly what sort of the lines talk about in the passage. So A is going to be the correct answer for number 46. Moving on, number 47, another vocabulary question. As used in line 48, patch most nearly means. Here in line 48, each patch has been well studied from radio to X-rays. So each, sort of location, each sort of area, each location, each region, sort of, each part of the sky has been well studied from radio to X-rays. So let's look for an answer here that makes sense in context. Each connection, no. Each allotment of the sky, because remember, in context, this is talking about the 5 patches of the sky. So each allotment of the sky, each covering of the sky, each region of the sky is going to be the answer choice that makes the most sense in context here. 47 is D. Number 48, based on the passage, the authors would most likely say that conducting deep all sky surveys, okay? So if we recall in the passage, they talked about, taking only 5 patches and doing the studies. Say that conducting deep all sky surveys to obtain information about ancient galaxies is, okay, so let's see what they say about the 5 patches method. So here they say the reason why they only test 5 patches is because they're physically representative of the universe at large. So if you can, represent the universe at large with only 5 patches, then you don't have to test the whole sky. You can only test 5 patches and it's enough. So for that reason, the answer should be B, unnecessary. Because if you can get the same results with less work, then why would you do more work? That's just unnecessary. So B, unnecessary, is the answer to number 48. And the best evidence question, number 49. The best evidence for 48, let's look for the lines that we just talked about. So here we see around line 55 through 58, the reason why they chose the 5 areas is because they're physically representative. And we see choice C, lines 53 through 58, the lines that we just talked about. 49 is C. Number 50, the reference to the full moon in line 63 primarily serves to 63 rather. Although candles surveyed a total of area only about that of the full moon. Okay, so it sort of gives perspective as to how small the total area candles surveyed was. So let's look for an answer choice that says that. Give readers a sense of the size of the area investigated by candles. Well, this just makes sense because by saying, the area we surveyed was about the size of a moon, then it gives perspective to how big it is. It gives perspective to sort of how small the size of the area investigated by candles is. So number 50 is going to be A. Number 51, according to the figure, which choice is a possible redshift of a galaxy made of stars that form during the cosmic dawn? So cosmic dawn and redshift are the key words that we want to be looking at here. So redshift is the top axis. We don't want to be looking at the bottom axis. That would give us a wrong answer. We want to be looking at the top. So, and cosmic dawn is this lighter color along the left end of the graph, this bar here that extends from 0 to 1 billion years. So we want to be looking for a possible redshift range. So we can see here that it really, the possible values range between around 6 and around 9 for this cosmic dawn portion of the graph. So the answer choice for number 51 is going to be D, 9.0, because again, 9.0 is here, and it's the redshift value that's in this cosmic dawn, this lighter region of the graph. Number 52, astronomers estimate that the sun formed about 8.5 billion years after the Big Bang. According to the figure, what was the star formation rate in solar masses per year per 5 cubic megaparsecs at the time the sun formed? So again, this masses per year is the y-axis of the graph, and again, the relation, the x variable that we're looking for is years. So we're looking for 8 billion years. We're looking for the megaparsecs value that correlates with that. So if we look here, 8.5 is about right here, and if we go directly up, we can see this point on the graph right here at about 8.5. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th dot on the graph. And if we go across, we can see that it's about 3 or 4 around there, megaparsecs. So, yeah. So we see here, answer choice C, about 4.0 solar masses per year per 5 cubic megaparsecs. So number 52, the answer will be C. And that concludes our analysis of all the reading passages and our review of the reading questions.
Moving on to the writing section now. So passage 1 is just about transforming landfills into parks and like the numerous benefits that this has. So number 1, this is just word choice. The correct one here is D, for example, because that's just pretty much the only one that matches the message of like the sentence. The first sentence talks about how in U.S. cities, open space is difficult to come by. And then the next one talks about how New York has very little parkland. So that's pretty much a supporting example to the first sentence. So the best choice here is just D, for example. It's not presenting a conflicting opinion, so it's not B on the other hand. So D is just the best choice. So number 2, transforming landfills into parks has its pitfalls, but it is well worth the effort for communities to invest in these spaces. But is just the best one. If you try the other ones, they just don't work. So this one's just one that you have to substitute in. So 3, which choice best introduces the main idea of the paragraph? This paragraph talks about how land for land used as landfills before is cheap and very widely available, and it also talks about how this can help the environment a lot. So the first sentence should talk about how transforming landfills can benefit, like it brings many benefits. So the best choice is just C, because that's the only one that gets that message. It's the only one that gets that message across. So 4, this one is definitely just word choice. So land formerly used for garbage is usually inexpensive to buy. It is also prolific. So this one, it's just talking about how there's like lots of land that was used as landfill. So prolific isn't the right one, because that one doesn't really mean there was a lot. The best one is B, abundant. So for 5, exercise, play, and exposure to green space have all been linked to improved health. The best one is just A, no change, because this is just like a list, and you need to separate it with commas. But B isn't correct because it has one extra comma, and the other ones are just either too wordy or have the wrong punctuation. So for 6, at this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. Interest in urban parks declined around the mid-20th century, but has been revived during the past few decades. So if you remember the notes about like sentence addition and deletion, the first thing you should look at is like, does this sentence kind of contribute to the main point of the paragraph? And for this one, it clearly doesn't, because it's just talking about interest in urban parks, while the paragraph as a whole is talking about like the benefits of urban parks. or parks built over landfills. So it's going to be no. And then if you look at C and D, D is the best choice because it distracts from the focus of the paragraph. All right, 7. One example of a successful landfill park is Freshkills. The best one is just B because you don't need any punctuation here. It's just one clause and yeah, no comma or colon needed. Okay. The park offers many recreational opportunities largely unavailable in the city. These occur on layers of plastic, soil, and grass atop the garbage. So for 8, it says which version of the underlined portion provides the most relevant examples for the sentence. The sentence is talking about the recreational opportunities that you can do at Freshkills that aren't available in the city. So it's going to be B, such as horseback riding, nature trails, and kayaking. The other ones don't talk about the recreational activities. Okay, so for 9, this is pronoun reference. Its design also features a solar station that will produce enough energy to power more than 2,000 homes. So it makes sense if you know that it is referring to Freshkills Park, but you don't. The sentence before says coastline restoration introduces water absorbing plants. So you might as easily think that it could be referring to coastline restoration. So coastline restoration's design also features a solar station. That's incorrect. So the best one is just D, the parks, because that makes it more clear. All right. 10. The correct choice is just A, no change. This is another substitution one. If you try all the other ones, that will produce enough energy so that it powers more than 2,000 homes. That's incorrect. That will produce enough energy for powering of more than 2,000 homes. Incorrect. That will produce enough energy powering more than 2,000 homes. Since this is in the future, powering doesn't work. It's energy to power. So yeah, A is correct. Okay, 11. Turning the disgusting problem into an advantage. Freshkills uses a gas collection system that converts methane into enough energy to heat 22,000 homes. This one is just tone. Disgusting, gross, and foul are both or they're all too extreme. So noxious is the best one, B. Alright, so this is the next passage, passage 2. And this is just talking about what happened after Sherlock Holmes was written off as dead in the series. So for 12, the correct answer here is just A. Holmes, having plunged from a waterfall in Switzerland while fighting his enemy Moriarty, was dead. The best choice here is just a comma because this middle part of the sentence in between the commas, that's just additional information. And the best way to separate that from the other part of the sentence is just with commas. You shouldn't have a semicolon, and you should definitely have at least some punctuation. So D is not correct. And B just has too many commas. So it's A, no change. All right, 13. Which choice provides the best transition from the previous paragraph? So the previous paragraph talks about how Holmes died pretty much. And the only transition that really relates to that is D. Though Holmes' death seems sudden to readers, Conan Doyle in fact had long desired to end the series. All right, 14. Which choice provides a quotation from Conan Doyle that best sets up the information that follows in the paragraph? So the information that follows, it says Conan Doyle wanted to dedicate his energies elsewhere. And it also said he wanted to focus on writing historical epics. So he ended the series because he wanted to do other things. So C is the best choice. He takes my mind from better things, the author lamented of Holmes. That's just the best one. All right, 15. Ones is clearly not correct because this should be referring to Arthur Conan Doyle, the author. So it's just his. B is the most correct one, and it's very specific too. All right, 16. Believing the Holmes stories to be lowbrow work, instead, a focus on writing historical epics was what he wanted. So all these choices just mean the same thing, but they have, they're different. Yeah, it's just different wording. So you want to choose the one that's most concise, and that's D. He wanted to focus on writing historical epics instead. Okay, 17. Which choice best introduces the topic of this paragraph? This paragraph talks about the public outcry. The author received a bunch of angry letters, and people kind of mourned the loss of Sherlock Holmes. So this isn't specifically young readers. So A isn't correct. The best one is just D. While Conan Doyle was more than ready to part with the character, legions of fans were not. Okay, 18. Which choice provides an additional example that is most similar to the one already in the sentence? The example already in the sentence is the author received an abundance of angry letters petitioning for Holmes's return. So we're going to be looking for an option that talks about how fans wanted Holmes to come back. And the best one is B, keep Holmes alive clubs formed. Okay, 19. Which choice best combines the sentences at the underlined portion? It is even said that Londoners donned black armbands in solidarity. Such armbands are a traditional symbol of mourning. So the first sentence seems pretty good, and the second one just talks about like what black armbands are. So the best choice is just C. Black armbands, comma, a traditional symbol of mourning, comma, in solidarity. That's just a good way to describe it to people who are unfamiliar with what a black armband represents. Okay, D. So 20 is D. Strand editors panicked as 20,000 people canceled its subscriptions. So this is going to be possessive and it's plural because it's people that cancel their subscriptions. So it's D there. Okay, 21. Which choice best maintains the tone of the passage? So the passage has like a pretty formal tone. Caved kind of has an informal meaning, and sold out and loosened up are also kind of too informal. So relented is the one that best matches the meaning and tone. Okay, 22. Though Conan Doyle would always harbor ambivalence about the series, it is the large body of Holmes' stories. So, yeah, you don't need anything after the comma. The best one is C. Yeah, just try the other ones. And, yeah, you'll see that C is the best one. Okay. So, third passage. This is talking about the outdoor amphitheater of Epidaurus and how it has pretty much good acoustic qualities. Okay, 23. The source of this acoustic quality, therefore, has long been misunderstood. So the best choice for this one is just B, however, because the first sentence is talking about how the theater is well known for its acoustic qualities. But, yeah, I don't really know how to explain this one. It's just however fits best. So B is the correct answer. So 24. It is not until 27 that is study. The correct answer is D, was not, because since the study already happened, it's not is not, it's was not, which is past tense. It had not been, it would not have been, those both don't work. So the correct answer for 24 is D. Okay. So 25. This one's just no change. You don't need any punctuation here, and you don't need to end the sentence. Yeah. Neil DeClercq and Cindy DeKaiser of the Georgia Institute of Technology demonstrated that the theater's seating arrangement is the source of its excellent acoustics. Yep. Yeah. A is correct. Okay. 26. Which choice most effectively addresses the theories presented in the previous sentence? So the previous sentence talks about how, some people said that the blowing of the wind and, yeah. So it's talking about how the wind was helping the acoustics. The best choice for 26 is D. Modern plays have been staged at Epidaurus on windless days, because that kind of relates to how many people thought that it's the wind that contributes to the acoustics. But since modern plays have been able to be held there on windless days, then it's obviously not the wind. So, yep. 27. Since actors remained audible under all of these conditions and circumstances, that's just redundant. So the best one is D, conditions. You don't need to say the same thing twice. All right, 28. In considering the primary source of the theater's sonic properties, DeClercq and DeKaiser suspected that the key might be the way sound waves reflect or break apart when they encounter ridged surfaces. So, yeah, this is talking about like their studies of the theater and how it helps the acoustics. So it's best to keep it as is. The other ones don't really, they don't really match the main point. Okay, 29. Which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion? The waves encounter the theater seats. As this happens, as this happens is really unnecessary. It's best to combine it with when, because that kind of tells you that like when event A happens, then event B happens. So the best choice is B for 29. Okay, 30. This capacity helps people hear human voices more clearly than less important sounds. You don't need to say hearing again. Yeah, it's just then less important sounds. Those of less important sounds doesn't work because it's just comparing human voices and other and less important sounds. So yeah, this is just a substitution one. When exposed to speech that lacks their typical tones, 31. The correct answer here is C. It's typical lower tones. Yeah. So this is a possessive singular one, so it's gonna be it. All right, 32. At Epidaurus, the combination of virtual pitch and the sound dampening effect of the seats allow performers' voices to be heard fully and clearly from any seat. So the correct word here is allows, because it's not it's not that the seats allow performers' voices to be heard, it's the combination of sounds. So the combination is a singular noun, so it's just allows. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 7 should be placed where it is now, before sentence 1, after sentence 1, and after sentence 2. This one, if you just substitute it, you'll see that it makes the most sense here at 7. Yeah. It's a good conclusion to the paragraph, and it would just stick out if it was in the other places. Okay, so we're on the last passage now. Passage 4 is about the growing solar power industry. Okay, 34. Consumers have sought to become more self-sufficient, diminish their environmental impact, and lowering their energy bills. So this is just going to be a series of things that consumers are, seeking. So the best one is just D, because with a comma, that's how you set up a series. Yeah, the other ones just don't really work. All right, 35. Which choice most effectively interprets data from the table to set up the information provided in the rest of the sentence? So the rest of the sentence talks about how 80,000 jobs in the solar industry were added. So it's going to be something about how the overall number of jobs increased. And yeah, so we'll look at this. We'll see how much the overall number increased. It says total here, 85.9%. So the best one is skyrocketed by a rate of nearly 86%. All the other choices are just incorrect interpretation of the graph or the table. Okay, 36. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to support the point made in the first part of the sentence? The number of solar installation jobs increased 121% from 43,934 jobs in 2010 to 97,031 jobs in 2014. This is talking about solar installation jobs, how they increase. So if you look at the table, that's just the best interpretation of it. Okay, 37. Which choice best introduces the material that follows in the paragraph? So the material that follows in the paragraph talks about how it just talks about how the wages are pretty high. And also before it says like the jobs are open to people at a variety of experience levels. So the best one is just B. In addition to being abundant and accessible, jobs in the sector of the solar industry are quite profitable. 38. In 2013, solar installers' wages averaged $23.63 per hour, comparable to those of skilled electricians and plumbers. So if you were to say comparable to a skilled electrician or plumber, that's comparing the wages to the plumbers and electricians. So that's incorrect. It's going to be comparing the wages of solar installers and the wages of skilled electricians and plumbers. So the correct answer for 38 is A, no change. The rapid proliferation of well-paying jobs in solar installation is largely attributable. The rapid proliferation is just a singular, so it's is. If it was plural, it would be are. But the correct answer for 39 is C. They're largely attributable to the falling price of solar energy. It's just C, 2 with no punctuation because the punctuation just unnecessarily breaks it up. Okay, 41. Solar power is now competitive with other energy sources in many markets. Yeah, the best one is just a development that has led utility companies and private homeowners to use it. So the competitiveness of solar power is the development that it's talking about in sentence A. All the other ones just don't make as much sense. Okay, 42. Which choice provides the best transition from the previous paragraph? So yeah, this is talking about how the price of solar systems have gone down and how many like homeowners use it. So the best choice is it's just B. Even though consumers of solar power systems may prioritize saving money over helping the environment. Yeah, the this one has the most direct connection to the previous paragraph, which talked about homeowners and why they preferred to use solar. Okay, 43. Consumers are not the only ones for whom solar power is a win-win scenario. Um, yeah, for whom solar power is a win-win scenario, though. A colon is the best choice here um, because the part after the first part of the sentence, it's just an explanation of, yeah, it's just additional information and an explanation. So colon makes the most sense here. Okay, 44. The best choice is A. This is another one that just you choose the one that's the most concise, and A is the correct answer.
Number one is she spends $200 to lease snowboard equipment. A lift ticket is $44. She purchased T lift tickets. How much money did she spend? This is the basic equation. She started off spending a base $200, so it can be A. And she adds $44 per lift ticket. That's C. Number two, which would find so in this case, you're just gonna combine like terms. So first, R cubed is not gonna be R cubed, so R cubed plus 3q squared plus this 2q squared. That's gonna be, so that's 5q squared minus aq because that's only q. And then there's the 2r here because you distribute it plus the 5r here, so plus 7r. D. Number three, which at the final equation represents the line blah 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 that passes through 0.3 and a slope of -3. This is just -3x plus 3. Very simple. D. Number four, A, B, C are constants. The equation infinitely many solutions, which the following must be equal to C. In this case, if you think back to the last problems that I did, if you watch that video, this is basically where you have to make sure the coefficients line up. So first I would distribute this, you'd get 2x plus b, 2b equals ax plus c. In this case, what I know is a equals 2, c equals 2b. You want to know what's equal to c, 2b, d. Number five, which will go equivalent to this. In this case, what I would do is I would factor this out. That would give me, sorry, that'd give me 4x squared plus 16x plus 16 minus 4x squared. So that's 16x plus 16. That's x times, sorry, that's 16, my bad. 16 times x plus 1, that's a. Okay, number 6. You have a line here, which is the functional equivalent equation of line L. So in this case, you know it starts at 3, and then it takes 2x values to go down 1 y. That gives me a slope of -1/2. Plus I have a starting point at 3. So that's the equation in slope-intercept form. But now I need to see which one of these gives me that. So I would start by converting A in slope-intercept form. And you can just tell, you usually just use it in your mind, you just move the x over, so you have 2y minus equal -x plus 6, and that equals, and you divide both sides by 2 equals -1/2 x plus 3. And that's the right answer there. That's right. Sorry, A is the right answer there. Okay, number 7. Which is the so we have it goes up by 1 in each x value, but the y value is by A, B, X, and you know that A is less than B and B is less than C, so you know that it goes up as X goes up, at least in this at least in the that's the first quadrant. So which one of these cannot be the graph? Here it goes up as X goes up, so it can't be A. Here it goes up as X goes up. D it goes up as X goes up, but B it goes down exponentially. So that's why B is the right answer, because it cannot be that one. Okay, number 8. If 3x minus 6y equals 9z, which the function question is equal to 2x squared minus 4xy plus 4y squared. Here, if you factor this out, this would give you x x plus 2y. So x minus 2y, my bad. Let me just write this neater. This would give you x minus 2y squared. And if I can factor, I can divide both sides of 3 by this equation to get x minus 2y equals 3z. So now I know that this is equal to 3z, so 3z squared is equal to 9z squared, and that equals c. Okay, number 9, which is the following equivalent to the solution to the equation above. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to do the quadratic formula, which is negative b, so that's 4 plus or minus square root of b squared, so that's 16, minus 2ac, which is 2 times 2, which is minus 4ac, minus 4, which is 8, over 2, because 2 minus over 2a, but a is 1, so that gives me 4 plus or minus 2 root 2, because 16 minus a is square root of 8, so that's 2 root 2, over 2, that's 2 plus or minus root 2, and which is a solution, so it could be either 2 plus root 2 or 2 minus root 2, and when that works, is C. Okay, number 10. We have this function. Basically, this is n is equal to 0, between 0 and 72, and n is the number of years after 1940. So what's the number? 5.77. And remember, we've done this, like if you remember back to the problems that we did about exponential growth, this is the exponential growth equation. So in the exponential growth equation, this number is equal to the initial value. And here the initial value is the 1940. So number of farms in 1940. That's why A is the right answer there. See, that's why if you've already seen where going over the problems that I shared can be really helpful already. Okay, number 11. Blah, blah, blah. Where does this coordinate intersect, and x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0? So here, if you the best case scenario is x squared is equal to 2x plus 3, x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0, and this can be factored out into x minus 3, x plus 1. I know this x plus 1 will give me a negative x value, so I can already know I'm not going to use that x value, but x minus 3, I know that gives me 3, so x is equal to 3, and if x is equal to 3, then I just plug that back in, 3 squared, that's equal to 9, that's why D is the answer there. Number 12, which is the function solution to the equation, blah. In this case, what I would do is I would just plug in these numbers. So what I would first do is I would first move the 2 to the other side, and factor out the 4, so that would be 4 times, sorry, 4 times x squared plus x is equal to 3. So I already know from this that this value has to be a fraction. So I'm just gonna start plugging in numbers. So I first plug in negative 1/2, 1.5. That gives me 4 times negative 1.5 squared is 2.25 plus negative 1.5 equals 3. That gives me 4 times 0.75 is equal to 3, and that is true. So I know A is the answer. But if it wasn't true, I would check B, I would check C, I would check D. However, none of those would be the right answer. So if you have time, I would check the other answers to make sure that A is not really the right answer. But in this case, A is the right answer. So yeah. 13, the equation P equals 14.7 plus 0.43D approximates the pressure, pounds per square inch. You want to know what's the increase in depth that's necessary for to increase pressure by 1 pound per square inch. So you want to increase P by 1, so you need to know what would D have to be to increase P by 1. So we know so we know that we're going to have to make 0.439 equal to 1. So 0.439D equal to 1. So in that case, it's an increase in 1, right? So and I'll just see what value of D here equals would give me 1. Well, 1 over 0.439, that's 0.439 times 1 over 0.439 equals 1. This crosses off to equal, sorry about that, 1 second. Yeah, this crosses off to equal 1. 1 times 1 equals 1, and that's true, so that's why A is the answer. But you can also check the other ones and they won't work out. Okay, number 14. Blah, blah, blah. We have this. What's the value of 4x? Here, just add them all together. That's 16x over 4. That's equal to 4x, and that's equal to 4. So the answer is 4. Yeah. Okay, number 15. Xy plane, point 2.4, 2, 4, and negative 2, negative 4 are the endpoints of the diameter circle. So basically, if I have a graph here, this point and this point are the diameter, which means that the center point has to be 0, 0. Because it's the midpoint between the two. So which functions equivalent to the circle. So what do you need for the equation of a circle? You need the midpoint and like the center point, and you need the radius. So I know the center point, so I know it has to be x squared, y squared plus y squared. So I know it can't be a or b. And for the radius, I just need to find the distance between 2, 4 and 0, 0. So so that would be 2 squared plus 4 squared equals square root of equals r squared. And I need to find r squared anyway, so I don't need to do that. So that gives me 4 plus 16 equals r squared. R squared equals 20. And the equation says that this is r squared, so that means D is the right answer. Moving on. Line K passes through the point 3, 1 and is parallel to the equation. If a line is parallel to another line, that means they have the same exact slope. So what is the slope? We don't even need to know what this point is. Since we know the slope of the equation, we know that the other line has to be the same slope. So it's y over 2. 17 ordered pair satisfies the equation above. What is the value of x? In this case, I'll just plug in y for the 2x. So y plus 3y equals 4. 4y equals 4. Y equals 1. So if y equals 1, then 1 equals 2x. X equals 1/2. Okay, number 18, what value of x satisfies the equation above? What I would do is I would move this other fraction here. So 1 over x minus 8 plus 1 over x minus 9. This really relates to the problems that we did last week, equals 0. So if I was adding these two, I would be x minus 9 over x minus 8 times x minus 9 plus x minus 8 over x minus 8 times x minus 9 equals 0. So in this case, since I know this equals 0, I know that the numerator these two has to equal 0. There's no other way that this fraction equals 0. So I can just ignore the denominator here, and I know x minus 9 plus x minus 8 equals 0. So that means 2x minus 17 equals 0. 2x equals 17. And if I move that over, x is equal to 17 over 2. That's how I got number 18. The two angles of a right triangle have degrees measures x and y. So sine of x is opposite over hypotenuse, that's 5 over 13. And you want cosine of y, so what's the cosine of y? It's adjacent over a hypotenuse, that's 5 over 13. So it's the same value. And plus, you know that x plus x and y are both add up to equal 90, so that's how you know that the sine of, that's basically how you know, So sine of x and cosine of y equal each other. But like, even if you didn't know that, if you just drew out the diagram, you could tell that the cosine of y equals 5 over 13. Okay, number 20. Equation above, a and b are real numbers, and I equals square root of -1. What's the value of a? So in my opinion, I'll just factor this out. So first, 15 times 6, which is 90. minus, and then you have negative 4i times 6i, which is negative 24i, negative 3i times 15, which is negative 45i, but now you have negative 3i times negative 4i, which is plus 12i squared. So, but you see 12i squared, since I equal to root negative 1, I squared is just equal to negative 1. So this is just equal to negative 12. So now I do 90 minus 12, which gives me 78. So I have 78 minus 69i, and I know that 78 is A, so 78 is the right answer. Number 1. So basically all we need to know here is that basically at the end of Monday they had 30 stocks. So we know it starts at 30. All these start at 30, so we know that's fine. On Tuesday, they shipped 10 tons and they received no deliveries, which means that they lost 10 tons. So what shows a negative? It can't be A. It can't be A or it can't be B because both show a positive increase. Next, on Wednesday, the company made no shipments but received a delivery of 20 tons, which means they increased after Wednesday. All of these show that, so it's fine. On Thursday, the company made no shipments and received no deliveries. So what that means is that it stayed constant. Only D shows that it stays constant, which is why D is the answer. Okay, number 2. If square root of 2x equals a, what is the value of x? That just means x 8 squared, which is 64, equals 2x. X equals 32. C. Number 3. 10 equals 2x plus 14. What must be 2? I subtract 14, so 2x equals negative 4. If 2x equals negative 4, that means 8x must equal negative 16 because I multiplied both sides by 4, which is why C is the correct answer there. 4. Hardbook covers, blah, blah, blah. 0.1 millimeter thick per page, and the front cover and back cover are each 2 milliliters thick. That's 4 milliliters total. That's a total thickness. That's the initial thickness, but per page it's 0.1 millimeter. So you want in millimeters, right? So closed book has that with 9 end pages. So we know it starts out with 4, so A has to be the right answer because it starts out with 4 and goes up by 0.1 every page. Number 5. Teacher sends over a program, automatically delivers book to the classroom library. Consists of the classroom library has 48 books, but it gets an additional 12 books a month. So after 5 months, 5 times 12 is 60 plus the initial 48. That's 108. So that's why B is the right answer. Number 6, area enclosed by circle is 25 pi square inches. What is the length in inches of the radius of the circle? Well, so we know the area is 25 pi, and to find area of a circle, it's pi r squared. So we know r squared equals 25 and r equals 5. So B. 7, and also run a sample. Mean working time was 4.7 hours. Margin of error of 0.7 hours. What that means is that, what margin of error means is that it can be within that, basically you do an experiment and you state that your margin of error is blah blah, which means that it can be within that plus or minus of that range. So I mean the real answer could be in the range of minus 0.7 hours of 4.7, which is 4 hours, and 5.4 hours because you're adding 0.7. So it's in this range. So which one says that? That's C. That's what margin of error means. Like it's either plus or minus your like the value received. So plus or minus the margin of error is what you know. The range it should be. You're confident it should be. Number 8, equation of line L and la la is shown above. Another L line K has a slope equal to double the slope of line L. So we have a slope equal double, so it's y equals 4x, and double the y-intercept, so equal plus 14. At what point do they intersect? So you have 2 lines. One has a steeper slope, and one has C, and one has a lower slope. So we know that it has to be a negative x value, so that means C and D are wrong. Wait, shoot, I don't know what just happened. Okay, sorry about that. There was some glitch with this PDF reader. Okay, so we're back. So we have A. So we decided it's not C or D because it's double. it's equal to it's the equation is y 4x plus thing. It has to be the x value has to be negative. So we know it's either one of these two. So what I would just do, or you can just solve this real quick. 2x plus 7 equals 4x plus 14, and then you just subtract 7 from both sides. Subtract 4x on both sides. Negative 2x equals 7. X is equal to 7 over negative 2. So negative 2 over 7. So A. Okay, number 9. Normal weather conditions, particular type of jet, 2.4 gallons, 200, 2.1, 2,100 nautical miles, the trip, and you want to know how many gallons of fuel will be burned for the trip. So this is very simple. You have the miles, you have 2.4 gallons of fuel per nautical mile. So you just multiply these two values, and if you multiply properly, you get a number similar to number C, 5,000. Okay, number 10. Quadratic function is this, which is going to be the graph of things shifted 3 units to the right. So what this tells me right now is, so right now the vertex is -2 comma -1, because it's negative. It's a negative this value and the positive this value. So that's the current vertex, and we're shifting it 3 units to the right, which means the vertex becomes a 1 comma -1. So what graph shows that? And it's going to be a positive facing slope because the a value is a positive number, so it's +2. That means we know it has to be b, because that's the only way it works with the right vertex. 11. System equations above. What is the value of x plus y? Here I just subtract these two equations. That gives me x plus y, because 5x minus 4x and 2y minus y. So I'm going to subtract 22 minus 17. That gives me 5. That means x plus y equals 5a. 12. In the figure above, line L is parallel to line M. If x equal to 40, what is the measure of DEF? So far what we know is this angle is equal to 40 and this angle is equal to 40. But what we also know is, since L and M are parallel lines, what you know, this angle is also equal to 40. That's just a property you should know. Well, like the opposite angle, like if you have like a diagonal line with two lines that are parallel, the opposite angle, like this angle, if this angle is equal to this angle, and this angle is equal to this angle. So we know that this angle is 40, and we know this angle is 40. So, and we know this angle is 40, and we're trying to find this angle. We need to do 180 minus 40 minus 40, because it's a total angles have to add up to 180. That equals 100. 12 is B. Number 13. We have a tree that will form a 1-inch growth ring per year. Its diameter increases by 2 inches per year. Represented by a giant security tree can also grow 4 feet vertically every 3 years. So every year it goes up by 4 over 3. So the following represents the diameter of inches and the tree's age. So we know it goes up by 2 every. It goes up by 2 inches per year, the diameter. So we know the diameter has to be 2. It has to be an x for every year. So that means it's going to be y equals 2x, which is why D is the answer there. 14 is how many years will giant security with a trunk diameter of 19 feet and 1 foot is 12 inches. So what I can just do is 19 times 12 and whatever, and you can just plug that into your calculator. So if I plug it into my calculator right now, 19 times 12, I get 228. But I have to divide that by 2 because it's 2. Remember, it's 2 inches per feet. It's 2 inches per year. So for that reason, so that's how many inches it grew, and I divided by 2. That gives me 144, which is C. 15. The linear model Z equals 4 over 3 W can be used to find the height in feet. So we already said it goes up by 4 over 3 feet per year because of this last sentence. So we know W has to be years. So that's why 15 is just A. We have a scatter plot and blah, blah, blah. It wants to know what is the closest to the difference in cents per pound between the actual in 2018 and the average production predicted by a given line of best fit. So what we do is we go to 2012, which is right here. So we at this point and we're the predicted. So we want to find the difference. That's around, it's under 10, so we know, but it's greater than 5. So which one shows that? That's B. Okay, number 17. Emma moves grass. She mows grass, my bad, at a constant rate of 1.5 acres per hour. She mowed before lunch and plans to spend 2 hours mowing after lunch. If Emma wants to mow at least 8 acres of grass today, which is the following. So it has to be greater than or equal to 8. That's all of them. So, but she started off with 2 before lunch. But we have it. We had to have it 2 as a constant variable plus it's 1.5 t per t because it's 1.5 acres per hour. That's why C is the right answer here. Okay, number 18. In the system of inequalities equations above, k is a constant when the equation is graphed in the xy plane. The graph intersects exactly 2 points. Which of the following cannot be the value of k? So basically, what we know here is so this is saying that it goes in 2 points, which means that we need to find the k value where this graph either touches at one point, which is the vertex, or it doesn't touch at all. So that's what we're trying to find. So honestly, what I would just do here is I would just like start plugging in. I would just plug in these answer choices and see which one doesn't work in that case. So first, like I plug in number 3. That'd be 3x plus y equals 1. That gives me y is equal to negative 3x plus 1. And that would work because it'd be y equals negative x squared plus 3. So we know that one would work. However, so you keep going down. However, once you get to 0, that wouldn't work because if you have a 0 value of x, that means that means it would just be y is equal to 1 and y is equal to negative x squared, negative x squared. So what that means is that one line is a horizontal line at 1, and the other one is a it's a downwards facing parabola that starts at 0, 0, which means that it's these two graphs are not going to touch, which is why D is the answer there. Okay, number 19. Of 100 people who played a certain video game, 85 scored more than 0, but less than 10,000 points. 14 scored between 10,000 and 100,000 points, and the remaining players scored 5,350,000 points. So that's an epic gamer. So which of the following states about the mean and median of 100 scores is true? You can already tell because it's such a huge outlier, that's a positive outlier. You can already assume that the mean is going to be greater than the median. So that's why A. However, if you're not sure, you know the median has to be between 0 and 10,000 because 85 scored there. So that means if the median would be between 50 and 51. So we know that the median is between 0 and 10,000 points. However, even if you don't even count all the other players' scores, if you just count that one epic gamer's score and you divide it by 100, that would give you 53,500, which is still greater than 10,000, which is how you know the mean will be greater than the median. That's why 19 is A. Number 20 to 22 is all this. So we have this 3 studies. Study 1, 110 graders selected at random. Study 2, 210 graders selected at random. Study 3, 300 were volunteered to participate in this fitness test. So what percentage of scores represented in the 3 studies were in the 50 to 59 range? So what you really gotta do here is you gotta add up these 3 values, and you're divided by the sum of these 3 values. And then if you subtract, if you divide it properly and you multiply by 100, then you would get the percentage total. And if you did the math properly in your calculator, then you would get an answer of D, 27%. 21, which of the following could be the median score in study 3? So median score means that it's so in study 3 there's 300 participants. So the median score would be the average between 150 and 151. That's how median works. So what I would do here is I would start from the bottom and go work my way towards the top and see at what point do I reach 150 to 151. So 88. plus 6, so but add another 67, I reach the 150 to 151 thing. So I know the median is between the 60 to 69 range. So which one could be the median? So whichever, and 68 is the only number in between that range. So that's why B is the right answer in 21. 22. The results of which studies can approximately be generalized for all 10th graders in mid-district in spring of 2015. The problem with study 3 is that they volunteer to participate. And usually if you volunteer to participate in the physical activity test, usually you're probably better than the average person. Or even if you didn't, if you have volunteers, that ruins your study because you can't do it to the general public. So that's why 3 cannot work. However, 1 and 2 are both at random, but 2 is the better study because it contains more people. However, since both were selected at random, you can use either one, which is why B is the right answer. So, but 2 is the better one, but what's it called? But sadly, you need what's it called? But even if you have 110 credits, since it was at random, it's fine. And plus, the other answer choices all have 3 in them, and we already said why 3 can't be the right answer. 23, Benjamin Franklin given an amount of money to Boston, Massachusetts. The money was being invested in 100 years for a trust fund. So I guess Boston's a trust fund, baby. if the if the value of the trust fund doubled every 9 years, which of the following graphs could best model the value of the trust fund over time in the 10 years? So it doubles every 10 years. That shows exponential growth. So which graph shows exponential growth? That's C. 24. We have an equation A, B, C are constants, which are evaluating what's A plus B plus C. So it's all values. It actually means it's infinite solutions. What that tells us is that the coefficients have to line up. So I'll just I'll distribute this x squared plus x plus 2x plus 2. So that is x squared plus 3x plus 2. So I would add A is equal to 1, B is equal to 3, C is equal to 2. So I add them all together, that gives me 6. Okay, 25. We have salary for thing. So you want to know what what's the equation to line the best fit? What I would do here is I would find 2 points where I know exactly where it reaches in a specific place. So I know exactly where it is. So I see that 5 in 1 year. So that's 4 years, and it goes up by 6 here. Because 2, 4, 6. It goes up by 6 over 4 years. So I know it has to be over 1, but it's 3 over 2, 6 over 4, which is equal to 3 over 2x. However, I know it starts at a positive y-intercept, so it can't be A. It has to be B. Number 26. You have this equation. How many distinct x-intercepts does the graph have? It has exactly 3 because since h and k are not the same, there's 3 possible x-intercepts. So let's see. And also, if you don't know what the square means, you don't even know for this question, but if it's let's say you have these 3 x-intercepts, okay, and this one is this point, okay. So what if it means square? That means for these it goes through it. However, it bounces off. Like if like not even square. If it's like an even if the variable's an even number, like not fair. The exponent's an even number, that means it bounces off the point. However, if it's an odd number, it means it goes through the point. That's something you can know. You should know. You can know for some other questions that may come up. Okay, number 27. We have a signal from a spacecraft orbiting Mercury, travel at 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. Distance between Earth and the spacecraft is which of the following is closer to the number of minutes it would take for signal from the spacecraft to reach Earth. So we have that we want to divide this number by this number. However, this is in kilometers. We first have to convert it to meters. So we do 2.0221 times 10 to the 8 power times 1,000. If you knew how a scientific notation works, you could just change this exponent, but just in case, just multiply by 1,000, and then divide it by 3 times 10 to the 8 power. And if you plugged it into your calculator right, you should get an answer close to C. Number 28. Equation above has no solutions, and A is a constant. What is the value of A? So in this case, what we know is if it has no solutions, that means that the the m value of mx plus b is the same. However, the y-intercept is different. That's how you know that it's two parallel lines, which means they have no solutions. So what value would make what value of a would make negative 3x plus x? So it would make it equal 7x. 2, sorry, not 2, negative 2. Because negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 3x minus 1 plus x, that equals negative, that's 6x minus plus 2 plus x, so that's 6. That's 7x plus 2 equals 7x minus 2. That cannot happen, so that's why B is the right answer for when it has no solution. Number 29, we have this graph. If a lake has a high alkalinity, so that's this, so the total is 340. So you know that's going to be the denominator. We're close to the probability that the lake also has a shallow depth, so that's 209. So now if you divide it properly in your calculator, you would get answer is D. Radioactive surface decay over time, the mass decay over time, which means it's exponential decay, which means that the exponent is a negative number. You should know that. Remember from the problem set we did earlier. The mass m in grams of a particular radioactive substance d days after the beginning of an experiment is shown in the table below. I mean, so we do see the mass goes down. The relation is modeled by this exponential equation, which is one could be values a and b. So remember when we talked about exponential decay, we talked about this equation, y equals a times, and it could be to the x power. So what this basically meant was that a was the initial value and b was the change. So since a is initial value, we know that the initial value is 120. So a is 120, so it can be a or b. And if you want to know what the b value, we know d has to be a positive number because it's d days, right? So days has to be a positive number. However, we want this exponent to be a negative number because, like I said, it's decay. So that's how we know that b has to be a negative number, which means it has to be the negative 0.02022. That's why D is the answer there. Number 30. Oh wait, no, never mind. That was number 30. I don't know what I was talking about. Yeah. Now we're into the gridden. So number 31. We have a scale drawing of a room that is 2 centimeters to 1 foot. It's 22 centimeters, which means it's 11 feet. If you did the conversions properly. Function f is property that for all x 3 to the times f of x equals f times 3 to the x file. So if f to the 6 f of 6 equals 12, what is the value of f of 2? So I would just plug in f of 2. So 3 times f of 2 equals f of 3 times 2. So that gives me 3 times f of 2 equals f of 6. However, I know f of 6 equals 12. So 3 times f of 2. Let me read that. 3 times f of 2 equals 12. So divide that by 3. F of 2 equals 4. Okay, number 33. We have this equation. That's the profit from producing and selling n units. K is a constant. If 200 units are produced and sold for a profit of 1,275, what's the value of K? I'm just going to plug in this value. So 1,275 equals 9 times 200 minus 2 times 200 plus K. I'm just going to add that to the side and subtract that from that side. So I have 400 plus K equals 9 times 200 is 1,800. Subtracting by 1275, that gives me 625. Sorry, not 6, that gives me 5. That gives me 525. So 525 is equal to 400 plus K. Subtract 400 from both sides. K is equal to 125. And then you can plug it back in and you can check your answer that way and see if it works. Okay, we have people visit amusement park A and amusement park B. You want to know the difference between, what is the difference between the mean numbers if we visit apartment B and apartment A? So this is very simple. Just find the mean of this numbers and the mean of this number, and subtract the bottom row from the top row. And if you did this, if you plug it into your calculator properly, you should hopefully get the value. Yeah, I'll just plug into my calculator to make sure, because I can't read what I wrote there. So here it would be 15. So how you would plug into your calculator, in my opinion, the best way to do it is you first you just plug in 15.9 plus 16.0 dot 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 over 5. So here would be 15.9 plus 16 plus 16.1 plus 16 plus 16.2 over 5 minus minus. Then now you would do the top row 15.7 plus 15.2 dot 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 over 5. So that'd be minus 15.7 plus 15.2 plus 14.4 plus 14.1 plus 12.3 over 5. You get 17 over 10, which is equal to 1.7, because you can't write 17 over 10 in this spot because you only have 4 spots. So you would be 1.7. If lines T and W are parallel in the xy plane, the equation of line T is 4x plus 7y equals 14. The line W passes to negative 3 comma 8. What is the value of x and y in the set of line W? So in this case, we have, so first I want to find, it's parallel, I know the slopes are the same, so I want to find the slope of this equation. So that gives me 7y equals negative 4x plus 14. Y equals negative 4 over 7x plus, well, whatever, I don't care about that, I only care about the slope, negative 4 over 7. So I know it's the same slope. So if I have y equals mx plus b, I have y and b, x and m. So I have 8 equals negative 4 over 7 times negative 3 plus b. So if I did this right, if I plug it into my calculator right, then I get minus 4 over 3 times 3. You get a value. Sorry, my bad. My bad. You get a value of 44 over 7 for B. If you plug into your calculator right. Again, for these that you plug into your calculator, if you have time, I would double check all of these ones because sometimes you can like misclick on your calculator. Okay, number 36, figure above, ABC and DEC are right triangles, and I know that the similar triangles because they share one angle and they both have a 9-degree angle, which means that this angle has to be the same, which means they're similar triangles, which means that the side lengths are proportional. So CD is equal to 20, and the tangent of ABC is equal to 2.5, which is 5 over 2. So what is the length of segment ED? So since I know the tangent of this angle is equal to 5 over 2, I know the tangent of this angle is also equal to 5 over 2 because they're the same angle. So that means 20 over x, let's say ED is x, is equal to 5 over 2, because that's opposite over adjacent. So you just do cross multiplication, you get 40 equals 5x, x equals 8. Okay, number 37, we have this, you have how much potassium you should have per age. So Andrea's recommended daily intake of potassium is 50% greater than that of a 2-year-old brother. What is the least possible age in years? So her 2-year-old brother is going to need 3,000 potassium intake. So that means you multiply that by 1.5 because the 50% greater. And if you did the math properly, you get 4,500. And that's this value. So that it's 9 to 13 years. And if you want the least possible age, so it's 9 years. Number 38, the recommended daily intake of potassium for an 8-month-old child is a fraction of what is recommended for a 2-year-old child. So 8-month-old child, that's going to be 700 over 3,000. And if you just simplified this, it'd be 7 over 30.